The discovery of these delightful artefacts began one of the biggest mysteries of prehistoric Europe. Sometime in the 4th millennium BC, a community in northern Britain suffered the death of a child. They were buried on a hillside at the edge of the chalk uplands of the Yorkshire Wolds. Carefully placed behind the child were these 3 carved chalk objects. Above the burial, the mourners raised an earthen barrow, a burial mound, and so sealed them away beneath the earth. Thousands of years later, in 1889, the archaeologist and priest William Greenwell excavated this barrow near the village of Folkton and discovered the burial and the enigmatic objects. They were a unique discovery. No one had seen anything like them before, and no one knew what they were. There were many questions. Why were there a set of 3 in different sizes? What were the meanings behind the carved lines and patterns? Were these eyebrows, eyes, and mouths carved into the sides? And so, do these represent ancient faces peering out at us across the millennia? Because of their shape, they were called drums, but they weren't thought to be musical instruments. And there have been various hypotheses over the decades about what they actually were. Suggestions range from children's toys to sacred ritual objects, status symbols, spirit guides for the dead, and even measuring devices related to the construction of megalithic monuments like Stonehenge. It wasn't even clear exactly when these objects date from. It seemed possible there would never be answers to these questions. But then in 1993, discovered far away in the south of the country on the edge of another chalk upland, another chalk drum was discovered. This one was perhaps unfinished and had partially dissolved, but it showed the original 3 weren't unique after all. And then in 2015, back up in Yorkshire, just 10 miles away from the original 3, another drum was found in another ancient child's burial. This discovery was called, quote, the most important piece of prehistoric art to be found in Britain in the last 100 years. And finally, there were answers to at least some of the questions. But many more remain about these enchanting objects. What do the carvings mean? What were these chalk artefacts for? Who made them and why? And what can they tell us about the world of prehistoric Britain and its people? This is the captivating story of the mysterious chalk sculptures of prehistoric Britain. From early mornings to late nights, your mum is always on the go, juggling work, family, and everything in between. So this Mother's Day, why not treat her to Everyday Earbuds by Raycon? They're the perfect gift for your mum, whether she's at the gym, out for a walk, or on a 2-hour phone call with her sister. Give your mum the gift of premium audio that goes where she does. Their latest model is better than ever. With a 32-hour battery life and with Raycon's quick charge function, just 10 minutes of charging gives you 90 minutes of battery. These earbuds also come with active noise cancellation, which isn't easy to find at such an accessible price point. Raycon's everyday earbuds come in a spectrum of vibrant colours and protective cases to match your or your mum's style. And if your mum doesn't like her Raycons, they offer a 30-day happiness guarantee return policy, no questions asked. They're designed to comfortably fit the widest range of sizes, and once I chose the correct size gel tips for my massive ears, I found them a perfectly snug fit. I use mine every day, at the gym for music while I work out, and for listening to audiobooks or research papers when I'm on my daily walks. I walk for an hour or more every day listening to this stuff. Because I'm so active with them, and I'm in noisy environments so often, I appreciate the protective case and the active noise cancellation, so I can actually hear what I'm listening to. So if you like the sound of them, please use my link in the description below to get yourself or your mum Everyday Earbuds by Raycon. Go to buyraycon.com/dandavis to get 20% off site-wide, brought to you by Raycon. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring the video. William Greenwell excavated the barrow at Folkton in Yorkshire in 1889, and he was a fine archaeologist for the 19th century. He was one of those learned men of Victorian Britain who investigated some of our many thousands of prehistoric monuments. Greenwell made an effort to properly record his activities and findings, but of course, we don't have the kind of details of the burials at Folkton that we get in a modern excavation. All archaeological excavations, even modern ones, are destructive to some extent. Today, archaeologists try to minimise that destruction by using non-invasive methods where possible and only excavating a section of a larger site where they can. But William Greenwell completely dismantled the barrow at Folkton, so there's nothing left of it to see today. and although there was another excavation of the site in 1969, the report on that one was only partially published. Apparently though, it was a round barrow with multiple burials beneath it. Greenwell believed the burial under a central cairn of a man and woman with a decorated ceramic pot he called a drinking cup or a beaker was the primary burial, while the child buried with the chalk objects were a later interment. And actually there were multiple burials of adults and at least one other child found throughout the earthen barrow at various depths. While he believed they'd all been buried at the same time, he also said the central burial of the couple had been disturbed in modern times, with the bodies removed and returned without their skulls. As far as I know, the remains of these people and other artefacts were disposed of or lost, so making sense of all this isn't easy. We don't have a way to date the chalk artefacts directly. The dating technique called radiocarbon dating requires organic material from an object, and the chalk can't be dated like that. You could test organic material from the same burial or layer or wider context as an inorganic artefact, and so date it by association, but that can't be done in this case, now the burial has been excavated. There are elements of the burial that sounded somewhat like the later Bell beaker culture burial practices to some researchers. The round barrow with a drinking vessel and other grave goods primarily, and the motifs on the strange chalk objects too seemed a bit like the chevrons and triangle motifs seen on Bell beaker era artefacts dating to between about 2500 BC and 2000 BC. But Neolithic burials could be rather varied across the 1500 years or so of the Neolithic era in Britain. There were a variety of collective tomb types, like long barrows of earth, timber and stone, and gallery graves and chambered tombs, and within them the remains of the deceased could be dealt with in various complex ways, including burial of articulated bodies in graves. And in the Middle and Late Neolithic, people started being cremated and their remains buried in pits, especially in and around circular enclosures like henges. However, only a fraction of the people alive in the Neolithic were ever buried in tombs of any kind. Most people, the vast majority of those who lived and died in the era, never received a burial. Instead, they were likely exposed on special platforms or at other open-air sites, or processed in other ways that leave little to no archaeological evidence. So everyone that was buried in or beneath a monumental tomb was undoubtedly special in some way, and clearly the child who received these chalk drums was special. There have been countless thousands of excavations of people from prehistoric Britain, some with grave goods and many without, and this was the only one with 3 objects like this. It might be hard to tell, but they're rather small. They range from 8.6 to 11.8 centimeters tall and 12.2 to 14.6 centimeters in diameter. You could cup them in 1 or 2 hands quite nicely, and they make a very neat set of 3 in their various sizes, almost like a set of stacking cups or pots. It's the carvings too that make them so remarkable. While rare, there are other carved decorated objects from the era, like decorated slate discs, carved stone mace heads, and the famous decorated carved stone balls of unknown purpose, some of which have swirling spirals on them like the tops of the Folkton Drums. The mysterious Neolithic stone balls probably deserve a video all of their own. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see. Neolithic artwork, from portable artefacts to open-air rock art and tomb carvings, is notable, however, for its lack of figurative depictions. There are very few images of people or animals from the era, and it might be they had a cultural taboo against making images of them. But perhaps the most famous Neolithic stone macehead of them all is the Naud macehead, found in Ireland, which is also seemingly representing a person's face. There would have been a shaft through the hole, so maybe we're just imagining things, but surely the relief carvings at the top and bottom, as well as the colour of the flint, is depicting the hair and beard of a man's face. There's also a wee chap known as the Westry Wife, or the Orkney Venus, made from clay, found at a Neolithic settlement site. They said it was a female figure because of the breasts carved on the body. Now, I'm not an archaeologist or an expert on female anatomy, but in my opinion, the shoulders are not where breasts are usually to be found on a woman. Whoever this adorable figure is supposed to be, there were other similar figures at the site, though in poorer condition, along with clay balls that might have been used for figurine heads. It has lines inscribed on the body that make rough chevrons, perhaps, and among its simplified features, the eyebrows are the most prominent and give it this wonderful character. Perhaps this tiny figure, and others like it, represent ancestors, gods or spirits, and were used as amulets or as a focus of worship. Or I could see them as children's toys. Maybe the incisions represent clothing, the chevrons woven patterns, and the circles on the shoulders were brooches to hold on a cloak or something. But representations of people in stone or clay are extremely rare, so the patterns on the Folkton drums that remind everyone who sees them of eyes, eyebrows, and perhaps noses and mouths are all the more remarkable, the largest and smallest drums especially. The middle one has a partially erased eyebrow motif, and it's not known why they changed that. Did the artist change their mind during the carving, or is there some specific meaning to these choices? Was the face repurposed in some way? The chevron below, which looks like a mouth in the other two, is also vertical. Anyway, these faces give the objects so much character. They seem quite friendly to me. The chevrons almost look like grinning, happy mouths. It's rather sweet and heartbreaking that these little people were placed in the child's grave, as if keeping watch over them for eternity. The small one touching the back of the head, the other two down by the hip, along with a broken bone pin. Speculation is the pin was used to close a burial shroud, or it was closing a bag that the larger two drums were in. Now let's look at the other two artefacts like these that have been found so far. The Lavant Drum was found in another chalk landscape in southern Britain in an ancient chalk pit in 1993. But only in 2005 did someone realise its similarity in material and dimensions to the Folkton drums, probably because it was apparently unfinished and undecorated, although it might have had decorations originally that have worn away or been dissolved by water. Details of the excavation have never been published, but the find was apparently associated with a type of Middle Neolithic pottery, meaning it was perhaps older than about 3000 BC. But in 2015, another discovery was made, and this time there was a proper modern excavation. A burial of 3 children was discovered by archaeologists working in advance of a power station development near Burton, Agnes, which is just 10 miles south of Folkton, on the other side of the expanse of chalk hills known as the Yorkshire Wolds. This was a heartbreaking burial of 3 children buried all cuddled up together. The oldest child was holding the younger two, and the younger two were seemingly holding hands. The chalk drum was placed above and just touching the head of the oldest child, along with a polished bone pin and a chalk ball. This is so similar to the Folkton child burial, and in a way it's like an echo of it. 3 drums and 1 child in one burial, and 1 drum and 3 children in the other. Both also had a bone pin. The Burton Agnes chalk cylinder also has 3 holes in the top. It's not known if they had a practical purpose, but it's been proposed they relate to the 3 children somehow. Incidentally, the researchers intend to do DNA studies to work out the family relationship, if any, between the 3 children, but as of recording, that hasn't been published. And finally, after the work was publicised in 2022, we got a radiocarbon date taken from a bone of one of the children. It gave a range of between 3005 BC and 2890 BC. So, considering all the clues together, it seems likely the chalk drums and burials date to around this era, a time of change in late Neolithic Britain. But the question remains, what actually are they? The dates of around 3000 BC and the century or so immediately after is quite significant. The Neolithic here started around 4000 BC with huge folk migrations from various parts of northern continental Europe as the Neolithic farmers colonised the British Isles in a huge and sustained effort. Soon after the colonists arrived, they started building large timber halls and megalithic tombs reminiscent of the ones their ancestors had built on the continent. They thrived and expanded for centuries, growing crops and colonising new regions, expanding the population across these isles, until at some point they seem to have stagnated and declined. They grew less grain. Instead, they embraced cattle herding. Populations may have reduced, and they built fewer megalithic structures. And then sometime before 3000 BC, a new belief system emerged, along with, perhaps, powerful elite. They began building new kinds of monuments, like huge passage tombs, and circular enclosures like henges and stone and timber circles. And a paper by 3 authors, including Stonehenge expert Mike Parker Pearson, links sites like Stonehenge with the chalk drums. This paper argues that there was a standard unit of measurement they call the long foot employed at certain sites, and they believe this measurement is reflected in the circumference of the chalk cylinders. They suggest they could be used as devices to measure out lengths of rope, which could then be employed in laying out distances for megalithic monuments. So a length of 10 long feet can be made by 10 circuits of the largest drum, 9 of the Lavant Drum, 8 of the middle and 7 of the smallest Folkton Drums. They suggest this would provide consistent measurements for fractions of the unit of 10 long feet. The concentric rings on top of the drums would also convey some kind of mathematical instructions, such as the number of rotations or circuits of the circumference to produce specific measurements. Close investigations of the chalk drums, however, show no sign of wear from the friction of ropes being wrapped around them. So the authors suggest the chalk drums were in fact representations in stone of the actual devices that would have been made from wood. These original measuring devices, of course, would have long rotted away, leaving no direct evidence for them. Mike Parker Pearson is a highly regarded archaeologist specialising in British prehistory, an author of many fine books on prehistory, and is an expert on Stonehenge especially. I, however, am none of those things, so bear that in mind when I say I don't find the hypothesis convincing. The concept of the Neolithic long foot as a standardised unit of measurement is reminiscent of the earlier idea of the megalithic yard, which has not stood up to scrutiny. I can see the builders of Stonehenge and a timber circle at Durrington Walls and so on could have used some relatively consistent units of measurement, but I doubt these were standardised more widely. I reckon architects used their own units measured by pacing or something, like medieval builders did. And likewise, I doubt the drums were skeuomorphic representations of real measuring tools. It just feels like a bit of a stretch. If they were tools used by expert builders, why were they buried with children? You can find and read this paper online if you're interested in the details, and you can make up your own mind. As always, sources will be in the description below. I do, however, think it's plausible that the chalk cylinders reflect wooden artefacts. The shape of them and their little domed lids do look like carved wooden containers. Perhaps these hypothetical items were common objects for children to own as they grew up, keeping carved wooden toys inside or other special objects. It's hard to say whether containers like this would be considered everyday items or if they were reserved for special events or life stages. The different sizes are reminiscent of the way children grow up though. You could imagine a child getting a new larger box at the ages of 5, 8 and 11 or something, associated with a rite of passage on the path to adulthood. The size grading might have included more than 3 objects, seeing as the Lavant Drum circumference sits between 2 of the Folkton ones. They could have come in larger sets of 4 or 5 or more. The idea that they could represent the personal belongings of children is perhaps supported by the ball found in the Burton Agnes burial, which could be a toy. The bone pins found in both the Folkton and Burton Agnes burials could have closed burial shrouds or bags for the grave goods, but could be personal items too. Maybe wooden containers could even be used in a kind of child's game, like throwing the ball in the pot. There are other enigmatic artefacts from Neolithic Britain that could potentially be related. 10 rough stone discs from a chambered tomb in Wales were also size graded, like the 3 Folkton drums. There's 8 of them in this photo. And there are slate discs found throughout Neolithic Britain. Some rare ones are also decorated. Some of these decorations are reminiscent of the patterns on the chalk drums. No one knows for sure what the slate discs are, but they're thought to be the lids for ceramic pots. They often occur in relation to a type of pottery we call grooved ware, which could be decorated in similar motifs seen on the slate discs and on the chalk drums. Grooved ware pottery developed in Orkney shortly before 3000 BC, and decoration on the pots also reflects motifs seen in late Neolithic tombs. Grooved-ware pottery soon spreads across Britain and Ireland, along with new monument types like henges and stone circles, and new burial practices and ritual activities like feasting at sacred sites. The associated pottery was likely involved in feasting and other ritual activities, and the motifs on them reflect those on the great tombs of Orkney in Ireland. Perhaps motifs to do with death and rebirth, and the powerful ancient lineages of the ancestors. Obviously this is speculation, but the burial contexts, the carvings themselves, and the recent dating evidence suggests these chalk objects had a special ritual significance reflecting these kinds of ideas. The material too might have significance. Chalk is plentiful in these chalk hill landscapes, and it's easy to carve, so perhaps it's just a matter of convenience, but it surely also had a conceptual relationship with the earth itself. It was the material under their feet, the matter they dug into to bed the posts for their timber homes, and for the graves they dug. It's white, like bone, and could have been thought of as the bones of the earth. Thought of like this, and considering the way they were placed in the graves, I wonder if they were something like little human skulls. The smallest Folkton one and the Burton Agnes one were touching the head of the buried child. I don't know, it's just something that occurred to me. The evidence suggests these objects are related in some way to religious beliefs about death, specific beliefs that might have developed and spread after 3000 BC. Perhaps they relate to life stages and adolescent rites of passage. They might reflect real organic containers, or they could be metaphysical containers holding spirits within. And that last part feels right to me. It's just a leap of intuition, but the Folkton Drums at least feel like a little family. Mum, dad and their child watching over the deceased, perhaps their beloved offspring and sibling, for eternity. But what do you think? Are they toys, measuring devices, or something else entirely? Let me know in the comments. And I think, if nothing else, these burials and their remarkable grave goods convey to us something of the love the families of the deceased had for their children, and they express something of the grief they felt at their loss as they laid them to rest 5,000 years ago. Thank you very much indeed to my patrons and channel members. By supporting the channel, you get exclusive content and ad-free videos. The links to join us are in the description below. Now, please watch this video on the enormous collective tombs and family monuments of early Neolithic Britain called long barrows. Thank you for watching.